Hey, what's up guys? Welcome back to another Woodbrew video. Just leaving home, headed to work. Got my coffee in hand. And in today's video, I'm going to be telling you guys how you can price your work, because I know that's one of the hardest things people struggle with when they're getting started. I'm going to go over everything today that I've learned over the last 5 years of doing this full time. And just like that, we're at work. Let's get started. So Molly's actually not going to be here today. She's got a whole lot of computer work to do, which just leaves me here in the shop, and there's a decent amount of cleanup I need to do. I don't know about you guys, but nothing stunts productivity more than a messy area. So the first thing we're going to do this morning is get things cleaned up. So now we got the immediate space sort of cleaned up here. That quick little win gives me a boost of motivation to get the rest of my day started and going really well. But before we get started on talking about pricing your work, I want to give you guys a little bit of an update on the yard. If you didn't know, I don't know now, it's been maybe almost 3 weeks now. We had a hurricane come through, probably like 2.5 weeks. And we lost over 15 trees. And it created a disaster zone in our yard. So I want to give you a little bit of an update on that. So if you remember in the last video, we had a giant pile of stuff right here. That's mostly taken care of now. Still have a little bit yet to go, but the big thing is that the majority of the stumps we have that we wanted to get out, we now have out. So check this out. We've got pretty much the entire backyard cleaned up now. There's definitely some areas that need to be smoothed out with the box blade, which I'll probably hop on the tractor and do that later today. But for the most part, the yard is cleaned up. Now here comes the bad news. Currently, there's another hurricane in the Gulf headed our way. Now it's still a little bit far out to tell, but it looks like it's heading this way. So hopefully, fingers crossed, that doesn't do what the last one did. I mean, we literally still have some damage hanging right there. So, you know, fingers crossed, I guess. I'm going to take a second to switch over to the really nice camera and mic setup, and I'll go ahead and finally get started talking. All right, guys, let's talk about how you can price your work. Now, this is a highly debated topic. There are many different methods. I'm going to show you the method that has worked really, really well for us over the years, and something that is more or less foolproof way of not undercutting yourself as long as you take the time to do it correctly. Now it's really simple. It's going to take just a couple minutes, and then after that I'm going to give you some what I believe even more valuable information, so stick around for that. Now I know this method is stupid simple, so just bear with me for just a second and I'll explain why it works so well. So all you're going to do, this is it, you're going to come up with a design. You're going to take the time to figure out the exact material cost or the rough material cost if you're good at that. When you're first getting started, you might want to actually take into consideration the actual material cost and go through the time of doing that, just because over time you'll develop this ability to kind of be able to roughly know what it's going to be and only have to do a very small calculation. But when you get started, literally calculate out everything that you're going to use. So in the first line, you're going to have expenses. So this is going to be everything that it costs to actually build the project. The second line is just going to be simply your hours you think it's going to take you in order to finish the project. Typically, I look at it from a day standpoint, so I'll just be like, all right, how many days is this roughly going to be in the shop? And typically, most things that we do are anywhere from like the 3-day to the 7-day, and then bigger projects could be all the way up to 14 days. And I just look at like the time roughly in my head of how long do I think it usually something sits in our shop before it's done. It's much easier for me to think like that than it is to me to just simply think like, how many hours exactly is it going to take, right? And then I roughly know how many hours I work in a day. So let's say that I work 6 hours a day. And I like to be a little like lenient there, because I'm not the type of person who's going to say I work a 10-hour day, even though I probably do. Only 6 hours of that is probably actually working on the thing. So let's just leave it at like 6, and let's say that it's going to take 5 days to build. Well, that's like 30 hours of work. So now you have your expenses, you have 30 hours of work under that. Now, what are you going to price that hourly rate at? That's your next thing you need to figure out. So how much do you think you're worth? How much does it cost as the cost of living in your area? You know, if you're living in Alabama where I live, cost of living is pretty darn low. But if you're living in California, then you could probably get a much, much higher hourly rate than I can. So what I typically like to do is I'll start somewhere around the $60 to $80 an hour range, and it really depends on the technical work of the project. So maybe if I'm going to be doing a lot of CAD and CNC work, I'll bump it up more into the $80 an hour range, because that equipment costs money, and doing all of that costs a little bit more money than just simply building something lower end. So our hourly rate will fluctuate a lot. And then I'll calculate that out, and I'll look at that number before I send that to a client. A lot of people will think this is kind of dumb for us doing this, but you have to be realistic if you want to actually get business, all right? So I like to start with what we would like to make on a project, and let's say that's $80 an hour, and if there's 2 of us working, then that's $160 an hour. So that adds up really, really fast at 30 hours, right? So if we're getting into an area of expenses plus hourly rate equals an absurd amount for the project that we're doing, and when I say absurd amount, I don't necessarily mean no one would pay it, I just mean the average person wouldn't pay it, then I'm going to ask myself, okay, how much do I want to do this project? How much is the return going to be? Is my shop currently overflowing with projects or not? And then I'll make an adjustment to that total sum number down to something that I can live with, right? Or in some cases up, because maybe they want it really fast, or my shop is slam full, and the only way I'm really going to decide to take it is whether they pay us more money or they're willing to wait for a long time. And that's sort of the way we do it. I don't have some hard, fast set number that we have to get every single time, because that's just unrealistic. Some people legitimately just can't afford to ever get anything made from you if you don't come down on your hourly rate. And it's great if your shop is 100% full all the time and maxed out, but the likelihood of that happening is pretty low. And if you want to make money, you're going to have to come down to whatever price point range your clients can afford. And I don't mean doing things for free, but I mean being realistic, right? Like if you see me online right now saying that I like to get $80 an hour, and you go try to charge $80 an hour, but no one in your area is willing to pay that, well then what? Are you going to change your entire career path, or are you going to start taking jobs at $40 an hour? You're probably going to take them at $40 an hour and try to figure out how to get more jobs to make more money. That's a big thing that people don't talk about, and something that people, I think, don't like to talk about, and is something that you legitimately need to be aware of, that you're going to have to do that. So that's step number 2. You have your hourly rate. Underneath your expenses, you add those 2 together, and you have the price of a project. It's stupid simple. It's seriously that simple. That's all it is. Now, one thing I like to do a lot of times, it just sort of depends, again, on where that hourly rate was. So let's say that I had to cut my hourly rate a lot in order to fit it into someone's budget. Typically what I'll do is I'll kind of add in a little bit of fluff. Typically that fluff is about 20%, so we'll put like 20% down here of the total cost, and I'll add that on top of it. That can help cover some costs like taxes and general like glue and random little things, or maybe you underestimated the time it was going to be in your shop.
So like a little bit of a buffer there can be a good thing to do, as long as, again, it doesn't jack the price up too much, because ultimately we're at the mercy of what people are willing to pay, whether you like it or not. I know that whole segment's going to rile some people up in the comment section, and I don't disagree with you by saying that we shouldn't undervalue ourselves and we should be firm on prices and stuff. But ultimately, like I said before, if you want to do this full time, you have to make sacrifices and cuts places, and you end up building your resume up to a point to where you actually can demand those prices and get them. If you aren't there, or you're just simply too high, you're just not going to get business. That's the way it works. You're going to get very few clients, and whether or not you like it, that's the reality, and it's something you're going to have to deal with. It's a hard truth that people have to face, and it's something that takes time. It's not saying that you're always going to get that set price. There's a good chance you're going to go up. In fact, I mean, simple inflation alone is going to bring you up about 2% or so a year. So, you know, over time, you definitely can build up your hourly rate and what people can expect to pay, but just know that you're not necessarily going to get whatever your hourly rate is right out of the gate. To give you a very typical example of what that may look like and something that we've priced in the past, if you want to do like a dining table, for instance, for us, typically our material cost is somewhere in the $500 to $600 range-ish. Again, depends so many different variables. But let's say we got a $500 material cost here. Then directly below that, we think it's going to take, let's say, roughly 30 hours or so. It's $60 an hour. We're talking, let's just round it up to $2,000 to give us a little bit of fluff in there. And then we have a $2,500 table. That simple. Seriously, just that simple. Now, I get that calculating your material costs can take some time. That's where learning SketchUp and different things like that will come into play. But ultimately, at the end of the day, it's one of the most foolproof ways of doing it, and will almost guarantee you that you don't underprice yourself. So here's that golden nugget piece of information that I was talking about earlier, something that, you know, this is really the meat of this conversation here, and what really is ultimately going to make the biggest difference in your business, and that is what you do before you price your work. Because pricing your work, to me, should be almost a guarantee. Like, you should have almost enough information to have a really good idea whether or not the client is going to say yes or no to that price. And you may have some discrepancies on design, but typically with price, in my experience, if you do your research, if you're upfront and talk about things in a real way with the client, then you're not going to have a lot of issues with people coming to you and saying, oh, that's not going to work. So a lot of times the client may be a friend of a friend or actually a direct relative, and in those cases it's really good. It's pretty easy to know whether or not that person's serious, whether or not maybe they understand what it may cost, and all the different things related to having custom work done. And in those cases it's really easy. But what about the times that you know nothing about a client and you're going in blind? What should you do? Should you spend a lot of time with them? Should you screen them? Or how do you do this? I've heard so many different methods of doing this, just simple ways to not waste your time. And I'll tell you, this is what's worked best for us. So one of the things that you definitely don't want to do is judge a book by its cover. Do not assume someone has or doesn't have enough money, because a lot of times you're going to be wrong. In fact, that's one of the biggest life lessons you can learn as well. Just because someone has nice things or doesn't have nice things doesn't mean they have or don't have money. A lot of times it's the opposite way around. So typically what I like to do is I like to just start a dialogue with a client. Now, this doesn't have to be over the phone. It can be via text or email, and a lot of times it's text or Facebook Messenger is what this initially comes in as. And when I do that, I'm asking some pretty simple questions, just starting off with, what is it that you're looking for? Can you send me a couple photos of what it is that you like? Because typically they already have those available, and that's what they're going to want to show you. It might be something like a Wayfair photo or a Pinterest photo. And then I'll simply ask them if they have a budget for this project. And when I say that, 99% of the time I'll word it something like this. I'll say, do you have a budget set in mind for this project so that I can design something that fits within that budget for you? Now, some people will be hesitant to give you a budget, and that's okay. A lot of times those people will come back at you and say something along the lines of, well, I haven't really thought about it, and I'm not sure what this may cost. And when that happens, you do typically need to give them a ballpark price so that you don't end up wasting your time. And typically what I'll do is I'll say, well, in the past I have done a dining table for $2,500, and the cheapest dining table I've done has been $900. And they can be maybe potentially a little bit less than that, but definitely could be more than that if that's what you want. It just depends on what materials and things that we're going to do. Is somewhere in that ballpark seem feasible for you, and I'll start working on something that would work within that budget. Now they have a price range to think about and determine whether or not it's going to work for them. You haven't offended them, and you now don't waste your time or their time by going through a long process only to have the sticker price at the end be a complete shocker to them. There are exceptions to that rule, and that's when you're working with someone that you've worked with in the past, or you're working for commercial places. So a lot of times if you're working for someone that you've worked for in the past, you have a really good idea of how they reacted to the price before, what was feasible and not feasible, what they liked and don't like, and you'll have a much better idea. And honestly, I wouldn't go back at them necessarily with that same question. I would just take the time to create a full design and price for them, and even if they decline it, just know that they were a returning customer and you want to keep them happy, so it wasn't really wasted time. They may come back to you again with something in the future and say yes. Also, I will say with commercial, a lot of times that stuff is done entirely different, and there's definitely budgets in place there, but they're looking for quotes because they want to compare quote prices between multiple people, and they don't want you asking them necessarily what their budget is or what they'd like to spend or things like that. Now, I have had success doing that with, say, smaller mom and pop businesses, but anytime we've worked with a larger company, definitely don't really go that route. You kind of have to stick more in the professional lane with that. But speaking of professionalism, I guess that's another topic I'll jump into briefly before I wrap this up. So one of the ways that you can set yourself apart from everyone else is your professionalism, but that does not necessarily mean your formalness or your informalness. Those are two totally different things. What I have found over the years is some people are actually deterred from too much formalness involved in custom furniture. People like the feeling of supporting a small local business or person or individual whenever they're getting some custom furniture made. They don't want to be hit with all of this like professional email signatures and all this CC and nonsense and just this super extra stuff that comes involved with it, a 5-page legal document to sign before they get started. All these different things will deter some people, and you kind of have to be careful whenever you're doing that, because again, a lot of people are looking for that small town, helping the small guy out feel, whether you like it or not. A good way I've found of determining which way to go with someone is dependent on how they actually reached out to us. So let's say someone reaches out via Facebook Messenger. Typically that's a fairly informal person. They didn't go to our website, they weren't trying to email us, they weren't trying to phone us, they weren't trying to call us. And typically that person is looking for someone they can speak to on a relatively informal basis. That doesn't mean being their best friend, but it certainly means being available on, say, Facebook Messenger or via text message and answering their questions in a way that doesn't seem like you're giving them legal advice. I see this all too often in all different types of businesses where people tend to go a little bit too professional and it seems ingenuine and seems corporate. You never want to feel corporate. So find a good mix in between there. Typically what I like to do is I like to be a little bit more formal, slightly more formal on the first interaction with someone. And then once I've done something for them or we've continued a conversation for quite a while to the point to where maybe we're texting, the next time I initiate something, I will just text them. And I won't text them with a super crazy, hi, this is Dylan from Woodbrew, something, 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 I'll just text them like I'm texting a friend. A casual, simple thing. It actually makes a world of difference, I've found. Even especially when you're doing it while you actually like are ongoing in a project. If you'll just text the client a simple photo, doesn't have to be any sort of explain or anything, just a simple photo, and just say, hey, just giving you an update, things are going really well, check out the progress. That's not formal, that's friendly, and that is such a great thing. People love that. It gives them an idea of where their project is currently and gives them a good feeling that it's being worked on right now. So doing some more informal things in your business can really help you out in the pre-pitch phase.
I'm going to wrap up talking about that segment here. I think I was going on for a pretty long time, but if you have any more specific questions or would like to see more videos like that, leave a comment down below and I'll be sure to answer them. Also, I just get so serious when I'm talking about stuff like that, so I don't mean to just be like super intense, but it just comes out. This video is actually going live the same day I'm recording this, and I have about 2.5 to 3 hours to get this video edited and published, and typically videos take me about that long at least to edit, so I'm in crunch time. I'm gonna head inside and start editing. But thank you guys so much for watching. If you guys would like to check out one of these sweet hats, we have them available in the link in the description below. We actually have a couple different styles, and that's a great way to support us if you're interested. Also, if you want to grab some sick Ariat boots or pants or clothes or anything like that, there's a link in the description that can get you 10% off. Been really enjoying their stuff recently. I don't think I've washed these pants in like probably a week or more, just because I'm just wearing them every day. Molly thinks that's gross. I just think that's efficient. Well, with that said, I'll see you guys in another video, probably like Wednesday or something. See y'all later.